Targeted tax incentives are bad news. In a recent blog entry, our guest highlighted recent research confirming the problems with targeted incentives. John Sanders is a senior fellow in regulatory studies and research editor for the John Locke Foundation. And John, you've talked a lot about over the years about incentives and why they're bad. There's more research that says incentives are bad.
Well, it wasn't any surprise. I read that in a John Hood column this morning. You know, he likes to check up the latest research, and the latest research basically confirms the previous research that targeted incentives are good for the recipients and generally not good for the overall society.
And that, I guess, probably is not too surprising if you think that the people who are pushing for targeted incentives are trying to benefit a particular group and not necessarily looking at the overall outcome.
Right, absolutely. They want to generate the headlines that say, "Look, we're building jobs in this part of the state or in this here and for this industry," and no one knows to question otherwise.
As a person who studies economics, you might see this as an example of the seen versus the unseen.
Absolutely. It's definitely that, seen versus unseen. To be a good economist, you have to be able to ask the questions about what we're not seeing.
One of the most interesting pieces of the John Hood column that you reference and that you reference in a blog post at the Locker Room, the John Locke Foundation's blog, is a piece of a new study that says incentive grants tend to go up in election years. I'm sure you were shocked.
Yes, and a key part of that was not just that they go up in election years, but they go up in election years for incumbent governors. So when someone is basically a re-election year. And what I saw from that was confirmation in research that I've done in the last couple of years where I've just been following all of the incentives giveaways by our particular governor, Roy Cooper. In 2019, which was not a re-election year, he was giving away $146 million. He pledged in incentives, grants to corporations. This year, which was a re-election year for him.
This past year, 2020.
Yeah, 2020, you're right, this past year. The re-election year, he gave over $519 million, so over $500 million. So in the re-election year, he gave over 3.5 times more than he did in just a regular year.
Given what we know about incentives, should this surprise anyone, or does this fit in with how incentives tend to be viewed?
It doesn't surprise me. I doubt it would surprise anyone in North Carolina politics. And I suspect that a lot of people who are just involved in the politics of it probably think it may overall be a good idea. But that's why we have economists.
Well, if you'd like to learn more about this, you can read the blog entry at the John Locke Foundation's blog, The Locker Room. Our guest is John Sanders. He is a senior fellow in regulatory studies and research editor for the John Locke Foundation. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Mitch.